I'm Orendra and I'm a full stack developer. I work at Software Freedom Law Center India, and now, uh, now my colleague Radhika will introduce herself.
Hello, my name is Radhika Jhalani. I'm a lawyer and I work with the Software Freedom Law Center with Orendra. I do a lot of work at the center. Most of it is, most of what we do is related to policy. It's with law. It's about challenging arbitrary government decisions to make sure that we live in a free and open world, right? To give you a little bit of an introduction about our organization, Software Freedom Law Center might be one of the oldest digital rights organizations in India. We work at the intersections of rights and technology. So anything that impacts your rights but is intersecting with technology, we do that. Some of our projects are the Internet Shutdowns Tracker, Free Speech Tracker, some work on software patents, intermediary liability, and digital security trainings, right? The discussion for today is basically how can we use FOSS to fight for digital freedoms. The question that comes before any of this is what are digital freedoms, right? And why are they important, right? Think not too far, maybe beginning of 2020, right? Schools were still, students were still wearing backpacks and going to schools. Medicine was still mostly offline. You physically had to go to a doctor if you had a fever. Most of us were still working from offices. We would travel, in traffic, in pollution to our offices and go there. Come 2020, the global pandemic called COVID-19, right? Within a span of 1 month, everything went online. Classes were started to happen online. All of us were working from home except essential service workers. There was basically like no space for everyone to go anywhere. We started medical consultations, and in between all of that, a part of our country further up north called the erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir had approximately 552 days of no to low internet. So, all of our lives were there. We were all there, we were all working, we were all, trying to pretend that everything was okay, trying to get information about the COVID pandemic, doom scrolling, watching Netflix, and there was one state in the country which did not have internet, where people, students who were studying outside, or people who stuck outside the state did not know that during a global pandemic, if their families were fine, people could not go to school. There was almost like a 2-year zero education for people, right? And, in between all of this, there have been different, as a constitutional democracy, we have something called the parliament, right? As most of your countries may also have. Parliament is a place of business where we question policies, where we ask questions. Our elected representatives ask, important questions about the state of the country. One of the questions that's asked in a country with the most number of internet shutdowns is, hey, do you maintain any data which is related to internet shutdowns in the country? Is there any record? Do you have, a record of the shutdowns that are happening there, right? The answer that is given is no. As the government of a country, we have zero record of shutdowns. We don't know, if there the number of shutdowns that happens, right? And without understanding the number of shutdowns in the country, how is anyone supposed to challenge it? How is anyone supposed to, figure out what to do with it? So I think the first thing that we do is when we think something is wrong, we gather the most amount of information around it, right? So things like surveillance, things like privacy, things like shutdowns, things like website blocking, things like arbitrary takedown of social media accounts. A lot of times, and that's not only particular to our country, but a lot of times these are blank states. These are questions that you and I may have, but there are no answers. It is at times like these that digital freedoms come into picture. Is there anyone in the room here who believes that right to access internet should not be a fundamental right? That, it's okay if we cut it off sometimes. It's okay if sometimes you have internet, sometimes you don't. Anyone here? So do we have a consensus that right to access internet should be a fundamental right? Yes? Yes? We believe that, right? But we're still cutting it off. Do you take a wild guess on the number of shutdowns that have happened in India since 2012? 759 shutdowns, right? 67 of which have happened till date, and a state, mind you, is still under almost a complete internet blackout. The state of Manipur, right? That's the number of shutdowns the data for which the government does not maintain. This website that you see is a tracker which is built by us. A tracker which is built completely on an open source sort of a thing. If you scan it, you can also, deep drill down on the states and see the number of districts that, that get impacted by shutdowns, right? I have another question for the audience. What do you think internet was supposed to be like? Before, think Web 1.0, Web 2.0. What did internet look like? Was it supposed to be this controlled? Were there supposed to be these many regulations where, there is a new government policy almost every, month, I would say? Were the OTT services supposed to have licenses? Was the content takedown regime this complicated? Because from what I remember, internet was supposed to be open, decentralized, free, and feminist, right? Internet was supposed to be this great equalizer where, everybody, irrespective of their caste, gender, their position in the society, had a platform. They had a place where they could go, present their opinions, engage in open discussions, get opportunities, find career growth, find learning opportunities. But is it where we are? Or is it, has it become sort of like for small organizations, for example, let's take an example of Free Software Community of India, or let's take an example of a really small, decentralized platform like Matrix. Was it supposed to be, this controlled? Were websites like Element and Briar, which were recently banned by the government of India, was it supposed to be like that? Right? And the most funny thing in all of this is, all of this happens because the government may just not understand how these decentralized platforms work, right? We challenged the Briar and Element ban, both in Kerala High Court and in Delhi High Court. And I think our observation while we were, preparing the challenge, preparing the documentations is that it's not a threat to national security. It's just a lack of understanding, right? Web 2.0 is 15 to 18 years old. I think it was early 2000s that e-commerce hit, social media platforms hit, right? And of course, it's a big challenge. You just don't know what to do with the amount of hate speech that's happening across, right? You don't know. I think misinformation is probably turning out to be one of the biggest challenges of the century. And we don't know because the news travels very, very, very fast. But is over-regulation the answer? And how do we make sure that over-regulation doesn't come at a cost of people's free expression?
So here is our tracker, which you can look by visiting internetshutdowns.in, and if I give you a brief introduction about our tracker, so here you will see the shutdowns number by year wise, and if you click on any state, then you will see list down a description of the state-wise shutdowns. And here you can see the total number of shutdowns, and if you will scroll down, you will see more news about, and also the graphs which can give you more information about all the shutdowns happening state-wise and district-wise. So in more detail. I hope this short introduction works for this. So I'm just moving on the next slide and explaining you more about this. So this tracker tracks the number of internet shutdowns happening in India and also gives you information at district level. And we made this map in SVG, and we used JS to make it interactive and so on. So the backend of this the website made in Django, and the front end in basic Jinja templating. And we are also looking for volunteers and contributors to help us build and to revamp or to enhance the functionality of this tracker, because this lacks few functionalities or having few issues. And we are also having few more projects like free speech tracker, security.sflc.in, where we teach people about digitally safe, how you can be digitally safe. So he can explain you more about that in upcoming slides later on. So if anyone is interested in volunteering with us or contribute to our code, that would be very helpful for us. And we also provide certificates or merchandise if someone completes the certain minimum required criteria of contribution or volunteering. If anyone is interested in contributing or volunteering to our projects, they can contact us or me on Matrix, LinkedIn, or can direct mail on orendra@sflc.in. Now Radhika can continue. Thanks.
Yeah, I think it was 2 days back that there was this. Have you guys heard of Pegasus? The Israeli NSO software called Pegasus. Does it scare you? Right? Scary, right? That somebody has unfiltrated access to your device. Has it all? I'm sure it has happened to all of us. That you really want to buy this perfect pair of shoes, right? What you do is you go near your phone and you start talking about the kind of shoe that you want. And then there's an ad which will give you exactly the kind of shoe that you want, right? And it's like your device is listening to you, right? So it's okay if a device is listening to me. I'm not a human. I'm not, I'm not somebody who has national secrets. But what happens when your devices or when your equipments start listening to people who are human rights defenders? When people start listening to leaders of opposition, right? Right? Dissent is very much our right as a democratic country, and Pegasus did not just hit India; it hit so many countries across the world. And it's just one, it's just one software that we know of. There might be so many of them. Citizen Lab day before yesterday published a security update, and they said that every user of an Apple device should update their devices as soon as possible because there's a vulnerability, right? But like this tension and this stress of having some virus constantly in your phone, like having stockware, malware, everyday phishing attempts, scams, all of these things, right? I don't think that we should be on our guard all the time, right? That we're constantly like, our focus is to make sure that we're avoiding scams. Gmail, people who use Gmail, and most journalists in our experience, most human rights defenders are still using applications like Gmail. You know what scares them? There's a website called Have I Been Pawned? So when you put your email ID, it actually shows you the number of times your data has been leaked. And then you connect it to the fact about scam calls and very personalized scam attacks, right? Journalists, human rights defenders, they use these systems. They're not aware. They use WhatsApp. I think WhatsApp says they're end-to-end encrypted, but the messages might be, but so many other things are not, right? Where there is a better alternative called Signal. Right? These are FOSS-enabled devices. These are devices that FOSS enthusiasts who have privacy and freedom at the core of their value, at the core of their value systems, who have created it. But there's no awareness. There's nobody talking about the fact that Debians are better systems. I remember when I was in college, this is Delhi University, and they gave us free laptops, which is a very rare thing for a government college in India to do. And it was loaded with a Debian system. And everybody uninstalled it. I don't remember any single person who had it. They kept downloading all of these cracked windows, and the system was bad because nobody could use it, right? Like with cracked software come so many viruses. But nobody knows this, right? Because we're fed this into our head that a document means a Word, a spreadsheet means an Excel, a presentation means a PowerPoint. It doesn't mean that there is a Libro alternative, there is a WPS writer. There are so many better open source alternatives that are out there. Because somewhere down the line, the FOSS community, who has freedom at their core, has to convey this to people outside that there are better alternatives, safer alternatives, cheaper alternatives, right? We do something called digital security trainings also, which are sort of like, which equip attendees, journalists, human rights defenders to fight against malware, stalkware. So it's a mix of technical and legal knowledge. So if a police person is coming and is taking away your phone to search for it, what do you do there, right? What kind of communication methods do you use? We teach people how to, use encryption, teach them how to create keys, use password managers, all of these things, right? So many times people come to us, at least in my country, I can say this, that the concern, privacy is the last thing people care about. In a country which is constantly struggling with the very basic of human needs, you don't care about privacy, right? But you don't care about privacy till you call it privacy. The minute that you start translating these words, these heavy words like privacy, into very real examples. For example, when you tell people that if you're not careful with your phone data, your number is going to get leaked and somebody is going to use targeted advertising to get you in a scam. People will listen because these are everyday experiences of people. There are these young girls who are, doing WhatsApp classes and online classes, and nobody bothered to tell them that, listen, don't put your DP, don't share your number here, don't follow basic digital hygiene practices. And the data would get leaked. They would be subjected to harassment. And in a deeply patriarchal society like ours, if you're subjected to all of this, then your device gets taken away basically, and you don't have access to education, right? So there is the way that we talk is not accessible, right? So FOSS at the heart of it has digital freedom, but the way that we need to talk about it has to be far more simpler. It has to be far more interactive. It has to be far more relatable, right? Let's talk about a couple of these examples. Arogya Setu. Arogya Setu was the famous contact tracing app that Indian government decided to introduce during the COVID pandemic. There was no data sharing policies. We didn't know where the data is going. Another example of this is CoWIN. CoWIN was basically like the entire infrastructure through which Indians got vaccinated against COVID-19 pandemic. In recent times, that data has been breached. Imagine a country like ours. Health data might be the most sensitive of data, right? And there are no data, so, it's portrayed as if these are open source, tools. There's something called a 2014 policy on adoption of open source in India, which means that all major government enterprises and all major government applications will be open source, but they're mostly not. We saw that in the cases of Arogya Setu, right? We now have something called digital infrastructure, right? We just finished, I think today the G20 summit, which talked about digital inclusion. It was a big, big deal for India, and even though it was a cyclic thing, it was portrayed to be as a great achievement. But the cyclic thing, it talked about how we need to have better digital infrastructures. But at what cost? Right? There's no privacy. We just got a privacy law, which will take at least a year and a half to be implemented properly. But at the cost of lack of privacy, we're building all of these infrastructures, right? The push has to be towards a more FOSS-oriented, free software, available code approach through which we can at least verify and make sure that our source codes are open. Yeah. I wanted to also I think a big example of this was the app blocking that at Briar and Element that happened here, right? So overnight, these apps were blocked. We were in touch with the companies that that build the software organizations, right? They did not receive a notice. They didn't receive anything. It's basically somebody's entered your house without a warrant and searching for it without telling you why or without giving you a reason. It's just one of those things that has happened, right? And everybody was scrambling, figuring out what to do, right? People didn't understand what a decentralized network is. And we are scrambling. The thing is that when such things happen, the only way to fight against them is to litigate. When something like a blocking by a government has already happened, the way you fight against it is you litigate against it, right? But even to litigate against it, you have to have something with you to be able to challenge it and say that this is not what's working, right? So after a lot of scrambling, we did manage to file 2 petitions in 2 different courts. We needed so many technical affidavits. Within our own team, because we're a bunch of lawyers also, it took us a very long time to actually understand how decentralized and federated applications like Matrix actually works, right? And we took help from a lot of free software community developers, and Praveen, because he helps us with challenging a lot of arbitrary blocks. So Praveen helped us a lot to sort of figure out how all of this works. But again, my point here that I'm trying to make here is there was no information about all of these things in the public domain, right? It took us a very long time to understand. People who work with free software left, right, and center, right? The idea is that our FOSS has to sort of do like a little bit of a image building where it's more accessible, where technologies have been explained in a way that's better, right? We've already established that digital rights are human rights: access to internet, right to privacy, right to interpret communication, digital security, right against being surveilled by various things, right against your devices listening to you, right against random malwares coming in every second, third day, right? As free software advocates, the reasons why you should care about these things is because privacy is important, right? Privacy is the backbone of all of our work. Free software is essential for knowledge and security practices. As I was talking about how, when we were young, all we did was download cracked software through torrents because that was the fashion. That is the way that we were taught. We didn't know there were alternatives. At least I didn't know. And I studied in like a good English medium school where there was no lack of knowledge. But there is no mainstream conversations about alternatives, right? Digital rights are at the heart of the new age. We cannot function without internet. It's an unthinkable future, and it's very important that we guard the internet. And internet should not only be just access to internet, but access to meaningful connectivity. Access for everyone, good access, no random blockings, no VPN regulations, unnecessary, all of that. And true digital security comes with privacy. We know it. We're users of encryption. we are users of devices which sort of promote good encryption. We need to understand these and we need to develop products that help you. What can you do as enthusiasts of free and open source software? Is the first thing that we have to understand is they're interconnected, right? Digital freedoms cannot work without FOSS. FOSS cannot work without digital freedoms. They're two things which are connected like this. We have to understand that, and we have to engage more in policy discussions. We have to be aware of whatever is happening around us. We have to be cognizant of when such vulnerabilities come. We have to also understand how by normal people, how people who are users of proprietary software understand things, right? We have to talk about privacy in a way that people understand. We have to talk about the fact that there are little girls who have privacy, but there are also edtech platforms which have privacy concerns. But the privacy for a human rights defender is a different thing. A privacy for a person, a vegetable seller, or a person who's taking UPI, basically like the scan and pay payments, is a different thing. And we have to translate our work into that. We have to challenge laws and policies. I don't think that we can challenge any policy without the involvement of free software community, right? The concerns are unique. The way that we look at things is unique. For example, the Element and Briar challenge could not have happened without the free software community. So I think we have to be at the forefront of not only fighting it through technology, but through fighting it through policy and legal means as well. We have to raise awareness, talk to people outside, talk to them about what encryption means, talk to them about how can you simply have encryption, talk to them in a language that's accessible, do small security camps, teach them one new thing. Just teach them something as simple as using an encrypted password manager, for example. Support small digital rights organizations, SFLC, SFS, FOSS United. We're not only looking for monetary contributions, but we're also always looking for volunteers. We're looking for people to help us understand, the various technical standards that the government comes up with. Right? A lot of times that there's a gap. There's a gap between legal policy domains of it, and there's a gap in the technology bit of it. So you have to come together to explain and to, sort of build a community that works together. We also should develop products that can help create awareness. Something, even if it's a cute PGP key or things like that, which are, reasonable. Good products like Signal, for example. These are great products. And, in the mainstream conversation, the only encrypted email that we can think of is Proton Mail, right? But on the other hand, if you start thinking of proprietary email, there's so many. Gmail, Hotmail, Outlook, this and that, right? So we have to have, better designs, better products in a way. I'm open to questions if you have any.
Does anyone have any questions?
So I just want to know about any update regarding the Element and Briar challenge in the high courts.
Right. So because our judicial processes are considerably long, notice has been issued on both the petitions in Kerala and in Delhi. We're waiting for further hearings. But I think when we checked last, both these apps were available. Again, from what also we have heard is that they were only banned in Jammu and Kashmir. Right. So it's a very strange sort of a ban that some people can still access the websites.
So there's no stay order from court?
No.
Back?
There's no stay order. Because there has to be a hearing that has to take place. So we just have a notice. There's just been a notice that has been issued. But like legal challenges in general are also quite lengthy and time consuming, and they take a while.
I would like to ask you a specific question.
Right.
This is with regard to the challenge to licenses. How will you defend a device user? I'm talking about users.
Right.
Users are being just trampled upon by the various software products that we see.
Right.
Particularly a pacemaker, an implanted pacemaker has a particularly free software license. People call it as an open source license.
Right.
This particular device has a free BSD license on it, and the code is actually closed by the manufacturer of the proprietary device. Now, how do you challenge and get the code unblocked? Because they say open source, you cannot really protect the user from the malpractice being done by the proprietary software or the proprietary device manufacturers, particularly with reference to this pacemaker.
Right.
So how do you mount a challenge to this device manufacturer who has closed the source of this particular device? This actually, the code was written in free, part of the code was written in free software, but due to the unfortunate decision, they closed it down because some part was using the free BSD license. So how can we open up the source code? Because the critical, when it comes to a matter of life and death, this particular access to source code is very essential.
Correct.
So how does the SFLC defend the user's freedom
Right.
of getting his pacemaker opened up?
Right.
That is
Yeah.
the question.
Okay, thank you. I think an example of this is during the COVID vaccination. If you remember that these vaccines started in private places, they were costing quite a bit of money. And there were no government vaccines that were there, right? And you could only like go through the COVID app to be able to do it. So we challenged that when that happened in Kerala High Court again. The thing is that as a user has to mount these challenges, right? There are a number of legal nuances here. Depends on the contract that's been signed to check like what kind of a licensing that the pacemaker is available, the royalty, what kind of copyright and patent, what kind of a patent have they been given. For example, if you know that software patents in India are sort of like, they should not be there, but they are there. There are multiple software patents that are granted every year, right? So similarly, there are certain regulations, and I will have to go back and check if the kind of regulations that are there for something as essential as a pacemaker. But there are different kind of regulations that are out there, right? So you have to be, a lot of times they're misused because people don't understand it, there's not enough awareness. You may not know about that pacemaker, but this was knowledge to me, right? I got to know about this today, that a part of it was an open source license. So the first sort of a thing to any sort of a legal challenge is to raise awareness, to at least tell people that something like this is wrong, this is not how it's supposed to be. So again, think of it this way, unless and until you tell people that surveillance is wrong, they will not know, right? They will be told that, oh, it's a good thing. For pacemaker, it can be generating money, it's generating profits, it's good for the economy. The first thing is to develop an alternative, right? And when there is someone who actually understands it, and then, you know, as a user, then they can challenge it. But it generally ends up being quite a long, drawn process. There has to be enough studies to be able to do it. For example, if today I challenge like the website blocking provisions in the country, the first thing that I have to do is I have to have enough data to tell them that this is wrong. This practice is wrong because these many websites have been blocked. Similarly, when it comes to pacemaker, we have to establish that it's causing a harm. And again, the first thing is to go back and look at the contract and see under what kind of a monetary settlement, under what kind of a license was the patent granted. So I would believe that it's quite a long drawn process.
Any other questions?
So I was just checking out the website internetshutdown.in. So Orendra mentioned that it was open source, but I'm not able to find any reference of the source code or the license which this is under. I can see a content license for data, but there is no source code license.
Yes, you are right. So I didn't mention that it is open source, but we are looking for contributors. So now you will ask how anyone can contribute, right? So we are doing some cleanup with code, and we are going to make it open source in just this month only. So that's why we are looking for volunteers and contributors. Okay. I hope this helps your answer.
Let's see in the next conference then.
Yes, sure. Why not? Thanks.
Anyone else? Have another question?
If you release it under the open source license, I think a lot of users would be, they will not come to give you and share code because it does not, an open source license does not give protection. Under the existing software laws in India, only the GNU GPL gives you protection. None of the other licenses afford you protection. So there will be no developers contributing source code because they do not want another proprietary software company coming in and stealing their code under the guise of coming and helping. They will embrace, they will extend it maybe, and they will extinguish it. They will not further it. So that is the fear of the developers. So nobody will come and give you code. Be careful. Don't release under the Creative Commons. Don't release under a permissive BSD license. Do not do such foolish things. Release it under the GNU GPL, which is a strong fighter for your freedoms. It will fight for the freedoms of the developer too. Thank you.
Yes, you are right. That's why we are taking a bit of time before making it open so that we can see the specific licenses that can help developers and us too. Yes, Radhika, do you want to speak something more?
Any other questions? I think our time is also up.
Yeah, we won't be taking any more questions. I think we are nearly done. I'd like to thank our speakers, and we'll love to continue fighting for free software in India and making sure our digital freedoms are protected. I'd like if everyone can have a round of applause for them. Thank you for joining us here.